Ku susuri jantung kota, Bogor sejuk dan indah. Berjuta kenangan ada. Ku nikmati tengah malam dan suara gerimis hujan. Basahi jiwaku tenang. Di sini ku berdiri, di sini ku bernyanyi tentang lembaran hidup, kenangan yang takkan pernah hilang. Bogor kota terindah, teduhkan suasana hati, tumbuhkan cinta sejati dan hati bahagia. Bogor kota terindah, bersemi mimpi-mimpiku, ciptakan masa depanku, suara doa di setiap langkahku. Susuri jantung kota, Bogor sejuk dan indah. Berjuta kenangan ada. Nikmati tengah malam dan suara gerimis hujan. Basahi jiwaku tenang. Di sini ku berdiri, di sini ku bernyanyi tentang lembaran hidup, kenangan yang takkan pernah hilang. Bogor kota terindah, teduhkan suasana hati, tumbuhkan cinta sejati dan arti bahagia. Bogor kota terindah, bersemi mimpi-mimpiku, ciptakan masa depanku, suara doa di setiap langkahku. Teduhkan suasana hati, tumbuhkan cinta sejati dan arti bahagia. Bogor kota terindah, bersemi mimpi-mimpiku, ciptakan masa depanku, suara doa di setiap langkahku.
Kampus terbaik, inspirasi, tebarkan harapan. Kampus terbaik, inovasi, wujudkan impian. Kampus terbaik, integritas, kuatkan tujuan. Kampus terbaik, beri terbaik untuk negeri, untuk dunia, umat manusia dan alam semesta. Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Majulah melangkah, oh majulah. Kampus terbaik, inspirasi, tebarkan harapan. Kampus terbaik, inovasi, wujudkan impian. Kampus terbaik, integritas, kuatkan tujuan. Kampus terbaik, beri terbaik untuk negeri, untuk dunia, umat manusia dan alam semesta. Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah, oh majulah. Terus berpacu dalam keunggulan, lincah pembelajar untuk kehidupan. Inilah semangat baru, tekad raih kesempatan, wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya. Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah. Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah, oh majulah. Wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya. Wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya. Kampus terbaik, inspirasi, tebarkan harapan. Kampus terbaik, inovasi, wujudkan impian. Kampus terbaik, integritas, kuatkan tujuan. Kampus terbaik, beri terbaik untuk negeri, untuk dunia, umat manusia dan alam semesta. Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan. Inspirasi, tebarkan harapan. Kampus terbaik, inovasi, wujudkan impian. Kampus terbaik, integritas. Dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah, oh majulah. Kampus terbaik, inspirasi, tebarkan harapan. Kampus terbaik, inovasi, wujudkan impian. Kampus terbaik, integritas, kuatkan tujuan. Kampus terbaik, beri terbaik untuk negeri, untuk dunia, umat manusia dan alam semesta. Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan. Dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah, oh majulah. Terus berpacu dalam keunggulan, lincah pembelajar untuk kehidupan. Inilah semangat baru, tekad raih kesempatan, wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya. Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan. Dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah. Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan. Dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah, oh majulah. Wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya. Wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya. Wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya. Wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya.
Di hatiku selalu ada namamu terukir berjuta makna. Di jantungku ada getar suaramu, mengalun syahdu, membisikkan najat cinta. Indahnya kita bersama, satukan jiwa ini untuk selama-lamanya. Bogor sejuk dan indah, berjuta kenangan ada. Ku nikmati tengah malam dan suara gerimis hujan, basahi jiwaku tenang. Di sini ku berdiri, di sini ku bernyanyi tentang lembaran hidup, kenangan yang takkan pernah hilang. Bogor kota terindah, teduhkan suasana hati, temukan cinta sejati dan arti bahagia. Bogor kota terindah, bersemi mimpi-mimpiku, ciptakan masa depanku, suara doa di setiap langkahku. Ku susuri satu kota, Bogor sejuk dan indah, berjuta kenangan ada. Nikmati tengah malam dan suara gerimis hujan, basahi jiwaku tenang. Di sini ku berdiri, di sini ku bernyanyi tentang lembaran hidup, kenangan yang takkan pernah hilang. Bogor kota terindah, teduhkan suasana hati, temukan cinta sejati dan arti bahagia. Bogor kota terindah, bersemi mimpi-mimpiku, ciptakan masa depanku, suara doa di setiap langkahku. Teduhkan suasana hati, temukan cinta sejati dan arti bahagia. Bogor kota terindah, bersemi mimpi-mimpiku, ciptakan masa depanku, suara doa di setiap langkahku.
Kampus terbaik, inspirasi, tebarkan harapan. Kampus terbaik, inovasi, wujudkan impian. Kampus terbaik, integritas, kuatkan tujuan. Kampus terbaik, beri terbaik untuk negeri, untuk dunia, umat manusia dan alam semesta. Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah, oh majulah. Kampus terbaik, inspirasi, tebarkan harapan. Kampus terbaik, inovasi, wujudkan impian. Kampus terbaik, integritas, kuatkan tujuan. Kampus terbaik, beri terbaik untuk negeri, untuk dunia, umat manusia dan alam semesta. Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah, oh majulah. Terus berpacu dalam keunggulan, lincah belajar untuk kehidupan. Inilah semangat baru, tekad raih kesempatan, wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya. Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah. Mari bersama hadirkan masa depan dalam langkah dan pikiran agar selalu terdepan, berbekal ilmu dan jiwa pengabdian. Deras arus zaman takkan tertahan, majulah melangkah, oh majulah. Wujudkan kampus terbaik selamanya. Wujudkan kampus terbaik
Pak Arief, permisi Pak. Bergabung dengan ruang sebelah dulu atau langsung saja?
Langsung aja mulai.
Langsung saja ya Pak, oke.
Kalau ini Pak, saya kan berkelanjutan.
Okay, bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? My name is Sylvia Dewi Sagita Andi. On behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to welcome all of you to this webinar. It's our privilege to have you with us today. Now, we are going to start the proceeding of the webinar. Excellency, distinguished guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Peace be upon you. Good day for us here in Asia. Good morning for our friends in UK. And good afternoon for our friends in Australia. And we are delighted to welcome you to the 11th SV-IPB webinar series with entitled Improving Linkage Between Food Security, Agriculture, and Sustainable Food System. We appreciate you taking time off your busy schedule to join us today. This webinar is also an opening program of the webinar and the fourth summer course on nutrition, agriculture, and sustainable food system in tropical countries. Honorable Professor Dr. Arif Satria, SPMSI, Rector of IPB University, Dr. Daze Hunayfi, Directorate of International Collaboration Office, IPB University, Dr. Insinyur Bagus Purwanto, the Vice Dean of the College of Vocational Studies, IPB University, Dr. Insinyur Wawan Oktariza, Vice Dean of the College of Vocational Studies, IPB University, Dr. Daisy, Senate of Academic SV-IPB, and international speakers, Dr. John Ingram from University of Oxford, Professor Bill Bilotti, PhD from University of Queensland, University Partner from Melbourne Polytechnic, Australia, University of Western Australia, Van Hollerenstein University of Applied Science, the Netherlands, Tarlac University, the Philippines, Iloilo Science of Technology University, Guimara State University, National Taiwan University, Nagoya University, and Taiteh Group, and also Politeknik Pembangunan Pertanian. In the time of the pandemic, this summer course program consists of 4 international webinars from the academy and the industry, lecturers, discussion, virtual field trip, cultural extension, international competition, and many more. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to the agenda. The first is opening speech from the Vice Dean of IPB College of Vocational Studies, and the second opening speech from the Rector of IPB University. The third is introduction to moderator. The fourth, introduction to speaker. The fifth, discussion, and the last is closing. Excellency participants, ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to listen to the opening speech delivered by the Vice Dean of College Vocational Studies, IPB University. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Insinyur Bagus Purwanto. Dr. Insinyur Bagus Purwanto, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Bu Selvi, Honorable Professor Dr. Arif Satira, President of IPB University, Dr. Wawan Utariza, Vice Dean of Vocational College IPB University, Professor Iskandar from Directorate of International Collaboration Office of IPB University, Dr. Alim Setiawan, Directorate of Student Affairs IPB University, international speakers, Dr. John Ingram, Food System Program Leader of Ford University, and Professor Bill, Director of Food System Program, University of Queensland, University partners from Politeknik Pembangunan Pertanian, Melbourne Polytechnic Australia, University of Western Australia, Van Hollerenstein Netherlands, Nagoya University Japan, Tarlac Agriculture University Philippines, Guimara State University Philippines, Iloilo Science and Technology Philippines, National Taiwan University, and Taiteh Group Thailand, and student delegates of summer course program around the world. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to the international webinar organized by our college, Vocational College of IPB University. I am very happy and grateful that so many distinguished students have come from both home and abroad to share the knowledge and experience, as well as to have an international culture exchange. I would like to take this opportunity to express my deep appreciation to President of IPB University for giving his opening speech, to Dr. John Ingram from Oxford University, Professor Bill Belotti from University of Queensland, and Dr. Risti Permani from Deakin University Australia for being the keynote speaker for this program. On the industry sector, I would like to express my gratitude to PT Greenfield, PT Aryo Food Indonesia, PT Kamastoria Bintara Nusantara, and PT Lingkar Hijau Indonesia for the support in the making this program more attractive and more practical on applied orientation. I would also like to thank the International Collaboration Office and Directorate of Student Affairs IPB University for their funding, and the summer course, the organization committee, whose members have worked together and been engaged in this program. Ladies and gentlemen, the coronavirus knows no borders. It impacts on every country and threatens the health, lives, and livelihood of people around the globe. The pandemic calls the strong international cooperation to fight the virus and care for the sick and to alleviate the socio-economic effect of the pandemic. risk creating a deep recession and affecting the food security and food system and of many million of people in the world. Food and nutrition security are the foundation of the decent life. Food is the basic right. In that the importance of food security has become paramount during the COVID-19 pandemic. Food security is being widely discussed as the further concerning consequences and of the increasing widespread impact of the COVID-19, leading to decreasing purchasing power parity and subsequently increasing the risk in food insecurity and malnutrition in the medium term and long-term condition. Food security and relations is a crucial topic not only for developing countries but also for developed countries. The webinar will discuss how to improve linkage between food security, agriculture, and sustainable food system in the tropical countries. This webinar is also an opening from the World Summer Course Program, which we done in second one is conjunction during the summer course program. I hope that you will have a productive days of interesting and stimulating discussion. I sincerely wish to this summer course program a great success, not only chance to share professional knowledge exchange, but also in the beginning of long and fruitful cooperation, collaboration, insight, and friendship among students and their university partners. Enjoying the program and thank you for your attention. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Dr. Bagus, for the opening speech. Excellency, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, now we are going to listen the opening speech delivered by the Rector of IPB University, and afterwards, we would like to request the Rector to officially open the webinar and the first summer course on nutrition, agriculture, and sustainable food system in tropical countries. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Arif Satria. Prof. Arif, the floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Honorable international speakers, John Ingram, PhD, Food System Program Leader from Oxford University, and Professor Bill Pelotti, Director of Food System Program, University of Queensland. University partners from Polytechnic Pembangunan Pertanian, Melbourne Polytechnic Australia, University of Western Australia, and Van Hol Dresden, Netherlands, Nagoya University, Japan, Tarlac Agricultural University, Philippines, Guimara State University, Philippines, Iloilo Science Technology, Philippines, National Taiwan University, and Thai Tech Group, Thailand, and student college delegates of summer course program around the world. It is my great pleasure and honor to welcome you at the first summer course on nutrition, agriculture, and sustainable food system in tropical countries, integrated with the international webinar with the topic improving linkage between food security, agriculture, and sustainable food system. Welcome to Bogor, the Rain City. The summer course program is organized by College of Vocational Studies, IPB University, which is designed for students around the world, not only to enrich academic profile and personal development, but also to improve their ability in global competition. Ladies and gentlemen, like air and water, food is fundamental to life itself. We need it to survive, but food is so much more. It is a source of enjoyment. It is an expression of culture and faith, and it brings families, friends, and community together. And food is an essential part of what it means to be human. The global food issue is very basic and very determines the fate of a nation. The number of food demand is projected to continue to increase until 2050, and the 2030 agenda challenge countries to eliminate all forms of malnutrition by ensuring that sufficient quantities of safe, nutritious, and affordable food are available to all. But it also requires countries to achieve this while creating the growth and employment opportunities needed to eradicate poverty, sustaining biodiversity and the natural resource environment, and adapting to the growing pressure of climate change. And of course, we need our food system to deliver food security and nutrition for all, to be economically sustainable, to be inclusive, and to have a positive impact on climate and environment. But we know that our contemporary food system are not fulfilling this aspiration, and that urgent action is required to remedy this situation by all the key players involved. Many actions are already being taken to improve food systems, and industry is investing in sustainable sourcing, in the reformulation of products to improve nutrition, and in the reduction of waste. Consumers are also seeking out healthier and more environmentally friendly foods. I think after seeing these conditions, IPB, as one of the best university in the field of agriculture in general, offers a short course, summer course program that emphasizes that the importance of a food system that optionally utilize natural and human resources and maintains the ecosystem for present and future generations. The summer course topic is very relevant to the current situation and important and timely because during the COVID-19 era, the agriculture sector was still growing positively, around 2.19% until second quarter 2020, and functioning as savior in the pandemic hit economy. The agricultural sector is closely related to food production and also the food processing process. The food processing process with the latest technology will be one of the solutions in the sustainability of the food system. Ladies and gentlemen, at this event, I'd like to express my happiness and pride because yesterday coincided with the 75-year Indonesian Independence Day anniversary. IPB University has been named the #1 best university in 2020 by the Ministry of Education and Culture of the Republic Indonesia. Not only that, this year, Alhamdulillah, to be good, IPB University made impressive progress in the World University Rankings. IPB University has shown as the world-class university by improving its strong position in global rankings. IPB has reached top 531 in the QS World University Ranking, recently released on the June 10th, 2020. This year's rank of IPB University is an increase of around 100 spots from its prior position last year, around 600. And QS World University Ranking is one of the most referred to ranking system of World University, including Indonesia. And the QS World University Ranking by subject on agriculture and forestry 2020 placed IPB University in the top 60 in the world, and which is named in the top 10 in ASEAN region after the other universities from China, Japan, South Korea. And we are also in the position of 77 according to Time Higher Education University Impact Ranking 2020. To conclude my remarks, I wish all participants have a fruitful summer course program, and this program is expected to open deeper insights into the importance of sustainable food system. IPB facilities, IPB trying to facilitate students and academics to discuss and share knowledge and experience not only for IPB and non-IPB students in Indonesia, but also international students, so that in the end, this program can attract students to develop their knowledge and ideas in order to improve a sustainable food system that is in accordance with the context of their respective region, especially tropical countries. By saying Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Basmalah, in the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, I'd like to officially open the first summer course on nutrition, agriculture, and sustainable food system in tropical countries. Thank you for your kind attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Prof. Arif Satria, for the opening speech. Now we are continuing our webinar to the next agenda, which is to hear the presentation which will be delivered by Dr. John Ingram from University of Oxford and Professor Bill Bellotti from the University of Queensland. This webinar will be moderated by Mrs. Intani Dewi, Secretary of Agribusiness Management Study Program, Sekolah Vokasi IPB University. Before we start, let me read her CV. Her education background, she graduated from Animal Husbandry Department Social Economic of Animal Husbandry, Bogor Agriculture University. And then she continued her master degree in Agribusiness, International Agribusiness and Rural Development Economics, University of Göttingen, and Agribusiness IPB University. And for the employment, now she is a secretary of Agribusiness Management Study Program, College of Vocational Studies, and she is a CityFed coordinator, College of Vocational Studies. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mrs. Intani Dewi. Mrs. Intani Dewi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Sylvia. Can you hear my voice?
Yes, I can hear.
Okay. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. His Excellency Professor Dr. Arif Satria, SPMSI, Rector of IPB University, the Honorable Vice Deans Dr. Bagus Purwanto and Dr. Wawan Oktariza, Dr. Ingdase Hunayfi from International Collaboration Office IPB University, and also the international speakers, John Ingram, PhD, the Food System Program Leader, Oxford University, and Professor Bill Bellotti, PhD, Director of Food System Program, University of Queensland. And also university partners from Polytechnic Pembangunan Pertanian, Melbourne Polytechnic Australia, University of Western Australia, Van Hal-Larenstein, Netherlands, Nagoya University, Japan, Tarlac Agricultural University, Philippines, Guimara State University, Philippines, Iloilo Science and Technology, Philippines, National Taiwan University, and Thai Tech Group, Thailand. Excellencies, distinguished guests, and participants, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for attending this webinar. I'm very happy to announce that we have almost 500 participants right now attending this webinar today from all over the world. So good morning, good afternoon, and also good evening for all participants all over the world. I am Intani Dewi, and I will be your moderator today. I'm very happy and pleased to see you, all of you, in this online seminar. So welcome to webinar series 11 entitled Improving Linkage Between Food Security, Agriculture, and Sustainable Food System. This webinar is a part of the first summer course on nutrition, agriculture, and sustainable food system in tropical countries, organized by College of Vocational Studies IPB University. And we would like also to thank International Collaboration Office and Directorate of Student Affairs Ditmawa IPB University for their funding and sponsorship. So, ladies and gentlemen, before we start the presentation, I would like to inform you the sequence of the webinar. This webinar divided into 5 sessions. So the first session is the speaker presentation for 25 minutes, followed by discussion for 15 minutes. So the third session is the speaker's presentation. For the second one, for 25 minutes, followed by discussion for 15 minutes. And the last one is the general open discussion for 30 minutes. So before we start, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Mr. John Ingram, PhD. He is Associate Professor in Oxford School of Geography and the Environment and Senior Research Fellow at Summerfield College. He earned his bachelor degree at King's College London in chemistry and master degree at University of Reading in soil chemistry. He completed his PhD degree in food system from Wageningen University in 2012. John leads the Food System Group at the University of Oxford Environmental Change Institute. His interests are in the conceptual framing of food systems, the interaction among the many actors involved and their varied activities, and the outcomes of their activities for food security, livelihood, and environment and food system resilience. He has designed and led regional food system research projects in Europe, South Asia, Southern Africa, and the Caribbean, and has conceived, developed, or led a range of major international research initiatives. He has had substantial interaction with FAO, UN Environment, and CGIAR, and many other international organizations, with a national department and agency, with NGOs, and with business in the food sector, helping to establish research on the link between food security and environment through the analysis of food systems. In addition, to leading the food system research group with ECI. He also leads the multi-university postgraduate interdisciplinary food system teaching and learning program, IPSAL, and coordinate the UK Global Food Security Program, Resilience of the UK Food System. And our second speaker will be Professor Bill Bilotti, PhD. He is professor in Food System, School of Agricultural and Food Sciences, University of Queensland, Australia. He earned his bachelor and master in Bachelor of Science in Australian Environmental Studies from Griffith University, Brisbane. And he completed his PhD degree at 1984 from University of New England, Armidale. Professor Bill currently is professor in Food System, School of Agricultural and Food Sciences, University of Queensland. And he is also previously been professor and director Food System Global Change Institute, University of Queensland. He was the president of Australian Society of Agronomy, and he's doing research OECD fellowship in biological resource management for sustainable agricultural systems, and he was formerly acting as a vice president Australian Society of Agronomy. Bill has 68 publications currently recognized by the Web of Science, and he has high index number 23. In addition, he has authored over 100 conference papers, and most of these have been referred. So we can wait to see them giving the presentation. So let's welcome our first speaker, John. Please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Tani. Thank you very much, Sylvia.
You're welcome.
Welcome. And good morning, good afternoon. Selamat sore to all of those in Indonesia, and hello to those outside. So what I'd like to do this morning is to share a screen, which will hopefully bring to light a presentation. Now, Sylvia, just confirm that you can see the presentation.
I can see the presentation. Maybe you can share your screen by yourself.
Yes, one moment.
Is it work?
I'll just go back to the share screen, which I thought I'd done.
Or you need someone to running it?
Forgive me one moment.
Okay.
Share screen is on. Share screen is on. Is that sharing now?
Not yet.
How frustrating. I'm sorry, everybody. Just bear with me. Share screen 2. Share screen 1. It was working a minute ago, and now it isn't. How frustrating.
Maybe you have to click the share on the left, on the right bottom of the screen.
Yeah, I'll just go back to that. I've got the share screen button.
Or maybe display setting, like before. Okay. Okay.
Are we sharing now?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, we are sharing your screen.
Okay. And are
Okay.
you now seeing?
Maybe you can change the display setting.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
Slide. Yeah.
Take the slideshow. Okay, how's that? Are we there?
Perfect.
Good, thank you. Sorry for that, everybody. Anyway, here we are. So thank you for coming to this seminar. It's a great privilege and a great pleasure to be able to speak with you all this morning and to re-engage with my many friends in Bogor. What I'd like to do this morning is talk about what we call food system resilience. Now, this is very much part of the overall seminar concept. The title has the word sustainability in it, but we're also very interested in resilience, particularly nowadays with COVID-19, and we'll talk about that later. So over the next 25 minutes or so, I'd like to introduce a number of issues and then welcome discussion from the participants later on. So I think the first thing to do is to say, what do we actually want from food systems? We want food security, of course. We want the three major areas of food security we know: food availability, food access, and food utilization. But actually, food systems deliver a great many more things for our societal need. For many people, it's a form of a job, income and profit, employment. It affords health, it changes our environmental conditions, ecosystem services, animal welfare, a whole host of other issues that people consider important. So we're asking a lot of our food system. First of all, what do we mean with the activities? We've got a wide range of social and economic activities going from the left of the screen, where we're talking about the primary production, the agriculture. We move through the processing and packaging, the wholesaling and retail to us all as consumers. And amongst all of those activities, we also see transport and trade, storage issues, logistics, and disposing and reusing. So there's a whole range of social and economic activities embodied in the food system. As material moves from the left to the right, it is transformed, it is changed. For instance, for my breakfast this morning, I had bread. I did not have wheat. And I was reliant on that set of activities to have bread in my house from the shop, which got it from the bakery, which got it from the miller, which got it from the farmer. So this chain of activities which transform the material into something which I actually want to eat. It's also an opportunity for many livelihoods. I've mentioned the shop, I've mentioned the bakery, I've mentioned the miller, and I've mentioned the farmer. And all of those people are earning a wage and a livelihood opportunity for the activities they do. It makes the bread quite expensive compared to the price of the wheat, because everybody who's involved adds value to the product. And all of that set of activities is mediated by a wide range of social, economic, political, and biophysical environments, we're called. So we have our food system activities at the top, and these give rise to our food security outcome. What we see is that we also have social and economic outcomes from the activities, the employment, the health, social capital, etc. And we also see a feedback between the activities and those social outcomes. But we're also very aware of the environmental outcomes. We see climate change, water availability, biodiversity, all being compromised by the set of activities. And again, there are feedbacks. And the important thing for the diagram is to recognize that there are trade-offs amongst the various outcomes that we want in society. Yes, we want employment. Yes, we want food security, but we don't want climate change as driven by the food system. We don't want a loss of biodiversity. So how do we balance all that? There are, however, synergies, and by good management of the food system, we can actually aim for what we call a win-win situation. So that's a general map of what's going on in the food system. Food system activities giving rise to food system outcomes. What's the general global food security situation? Well, as you're probably aware, there's about 1 billion people over on the left with insufficient calories. They're hungry, they don't have sufficient nutrients. In the middle red circle, we've got perhaps 3 billion people who are not actually hungry, but they certainly don't have the correct nutrients. And then the third circle is perhaps 2.5 billion of us who are consuming excess calories for our physiological need. And many of those of us with excess calories also don't have sufficient nutrients. So overall, we see the number of people with sufficient calories, sufficient nutrients, the green circle, perhaps being less than half of the global population. Now, why is this? What determines which circle anybody falls in? It's essentially the constraint on dietary choice and the diversity of that diet. And the consumption by the subpopulations of the world lead to these different proportions in the categories at the top of the slide. And they're governed by such things as affordability or cooking skill, or convenience, and particularly cultural norms. So that determines which circle anybody falls in. But remember my story with the bread. Where do I get the bread? Feeding in to the population, myself, all of us on the seminar, we see what we call the post-farm gate activities. After the food material has left the farm, the processing, packaging, shipping, all of those activities we saw in the earlier slide determine the final calorie and nutrient quantity and the price at the shop. And all of those people get their primary material from the farm or from the ocean. And here we see the farming and the horticulture and the livestock, etc., being important. And those activities set the basic quality at the farm gate, or at the coast, and the price. And those people are dependent on the productivity and the diversity and the quality of the natural resource base. So that in a way is a very linear system, but there are of course massive feedbacks. And it's these feedbacks that actually make it a system, because a system includes the components that feed forward and the feedback. And all of those feed forwards and feedbacks are governed by those environments we saw earlier, the social, political, the business environment, etc. Now, the point about the word resilience is that all of those activities are exposed to stresses and shocks. And we've, of course, got a major shock underway at the moment. We're also aware of the change in the global environment. We've got about a third of our soils are degraded. We know about 1 in 5 aquifers are overexploited. Perhaps 60% of biodiversity loss is related to the food sector. We know that the marine resources, about a third are overfished, getting on for 2/3 are fully fished. And we also have the issue of pollution and plastics and litter and all sorts of other problems, often related to the food sector. And finally, about a quarter of all the total greenhouse gas emissions from humankind are coming from the food system. So a big environmental footprint. And this was picked up in a big report from the Lancet early last year now, which was called the Global Syndemic, and it was the combined challenges for health and the environment that we're seeing: obesity, undernutrition, and climate change, all coming together, termed the Global Syndemic. But there are other issues to think about: the links between human and animal interactions, a very profligate use of prophylaxis leading to antimicrobial resistance. And of course, here we have one of the classic cases of animal-human interaction with the emergence of COVID-19, but we've had other issues in the past where human populations are interacting either with managed livestock or with wildlife. And there's a whole range of diseases and illnesses that we know. We can, of course, now add COVID-19 to that list. So the food system challenges are interconnected. What we're trying to do is achieve food security. We've got a growing, increasing in wealth and an urbanizing population, while ensuring we minimize further environmental degradation and related disease. So that's a big ask. But to add to the challenge, it's against this background of stress and shock. We've got natural resource depletion, stagnated rural economies, climate change, and massive social, cultural, and economic changes underway. So this is the task we have in food system thinking. How do we better manage the food system so that we can achieve food security without the problems elsewhere on the slide? What was interesting recently was the World Economic Forum produced a report showing the difference between global risks in terms of likelihood, which we see on the slide, between 2018 and 2019. Now you'll notice on the slide at the moment, we've got green environmental risks, and we've got purple technological risks. And what happened during the year from 2018 to 2019 is the order of these things changed. And you'll notice that extreme weather is still at the top, but the failure of mitigation and adaptation to climate change has moved from position 5 to position 2. Over here, we have the global risks in terms of their impact. So on the left, it was in terms of the likelihood, and on the right, it's in terms of the impact. Here again, we see weapons of mass destruction at the top, and for obvious reasons, remain at the top. But we saw over the year, again, the failure of climate change mitigation and adaptation moving from low on the list to position number 2. So obviously, climate change is a major concern. The recent months, it's taken slightly back burner compared to COVID, but it's obviously not gone away. So what do we see? What will we have in the months and the years ahead? Are we going to see a societies more like the picture on the left, or more like the picture on the right? It's a big challenge. What is coming down the track? In this slide, we're just going to explore what's happening in terms of global calorie consumption. Quite a lot of material on the slide, so I'll explain it. On the x-axis, we have the billions of people on the planet. On the y-axis, we have the consumption in kilocalories per person per day. The green line is 2,000 calories a person per day, which is recommended intake on average. And the grey sloping line represents what was going on with the population in the year 2000. So we had above the line, people with too much. We had below the line, the green line, people with too little. And the total population was about 6 billion in the year 2000. Here we are in the year 2020, 7.6 billion, 7.7 billion people. We've got more people with too much. We've got still about 1 billion with too little. The number with the appropriate amount, the proportion with the appropriate amount is getting less. So what we have here on the yellow line in go forward 10 years to 2030, the projection is we're going to have even more people with too much, maybe 3 billion, 4 billion with too much, and another billion with too little. The proportion with the appropriate amount is again reduced. And if we go forward a further decade, the projections are getting on for half the global population will be over-consuming calorie, and we have the fear of increasing number of people with too little. And the FAO projections and FAO trends over the last few years have been showing an increase in global hunger. So this is a possible, a plausible future if we do not begin to better manage the food system. The environmental consequences of meeting this projected demand with our current food system activities and consumptions trends are very serious. The costs of what's called the triple burden of malnutrition, too few calories, too few nutrients, and too much calorie, is already costing over 10% of global GDP through illness and lost work days. And just as an example, the current cost for the approximately 500 million diabetics on the planet is approaching $1 trillion a year. And over the next decade or so, there's an estimated further increase in the number of diabetics, so the cost will go up. So essentially what we've got to do is meet the demand for those people who don't have enough. We must eradicate hunger. We must ensure that everybody has the correct amount of calorie. But over on the left-hand side of the curve, we have the very difficult task of how do we manage this demand. So the point of the slide is for those who don't have enough food, we need to meet their demand. For those of us who are likely to be over-consuming, we need to manage demand. How are we going to do that? It's very, very difficult politically. It's very, very difficult socially. It's very, very difficult economically, but it's a task we need to address. So moving then on to resilience, food system resilience, we need to have a system that is resilient to further shocks and stresses. One definition coming from the ETH Zurich, capacity over time for a food system to provide sufficient, adequate, accessible food for all. This is just about food security, but remember that we want a lot of other things from our food system. We want the livelihoods, we want the environment, we want the animal welfare, etc. And so we actually need an enhanced understanding of food system resilience, because it has to accommodate these different perspectives which are looking at a common problem. And the challenge, the great challenge, it is a very value-laden debate. Because what I think, my worldview of the situation is not necessarily the same as your worldview, and we need to have a conversation. There are four basic questions we ask in thinking about resilience. Resilience of what? To what? Well, we could say the resilience of the food system. Yes, okay. To what? Well, you could list a number of shocks and stresses, COVID, climate change, volcanoes, whatever it is. So that's clear, of what, to what. But we also need to ask, for whom are we asking this? Who are the people who are interested in the resilience aspect? And finally, over what time period? Are we talking resilience over the next year, the next decade, or the next generation? So it's very important to have answers to these four questions and agree what we're talking about before we launch into a big discussion on resilience. Of what, to what, for whom, and over what time period. Of what? Well, are we talking about the resilience of the food system activities, what we call the functioning, the machinery, if you will, of the food system? Or are we talking about the resilience of the food system outcomes, which is what I call the function, the what we get? At the top of the slide, the activities, what we do. The bottom of the slide, the outcomes, what we get. And my view is that from a societal point of view, we're really interested in the food system outcomes, the resilience of our food security, of our wealth and income, of our livelihoods, of our environmental condition. Those are the things that we really want to be resilient. Now, obviously, they are dependent on the functioning, but it's very important to be clear, the of what, resilience of what, I'm saying relates to the food system outcomes, the function. That's the of what. So to what? Food system stresses and shocks. On the left of the slide, a little cartoon of a train. Imagine you're sitting in the middle of the railway track and you can see a big engine in the distance and it's coming towards you and it's getting bigger and bigger and it's powerful, it's worrying, but in itself, it's not a massive surprise because you can see it approaching. These are what I would call stresses. On the right, what we call black swans, which is derived from a fairly famous book about surprises. These are unimagined, rare, or completely unpredictable events. It is not something we know that's going to happen. So, steam trains, black swans, stresses and shocks. And some examples on the left of stress. Well, we've got demography, change in population, of course, natural resource degradation, climate change, all of these sorts of things. And on the right, there's a list of completely unexpected and surprising events. That is, we've no idea what they are. But in fact, we could say we are aware the concept of a trade war, the concept of a food scare is not unknown. We just don't know when it's going to happen. And when it does happen, it can be very major and very sudden. And here we have pandemic as a massive shock. So the difference between the stress and the shock is the nature of surprise, and therefore the way we prepare and enhance our resilience to stresses and shocks is quite different. So for whom? Well, look at all our food system actors. All of us on this call are included in the diagram because we are all consumers. And so ultimately, we're interested on the resilience for us all. And then over what time period? Well, we can have a shock, often a short-term interruption. For instance, extreme weather can interrupt a fishing or agricultural activity. Just in time grocery delivery, which is now very common in many parts of the industrialized world. Maybe an IT malfunction messes all that up. So these are shocks. And the disruption, which is normally due to a stress, could be these other things, energy prices changing or a change in dietary preference. So we've got the short term and we've got the long term. Now, what are we dealing with? The different management strategies will need to be chosen in order to address short or long term. So when we're thinking about this, what actually are we after? Here we've got a number of words. When you say resilience to a friend or a colleague who's not necessarily a food system thinker, they tend to think of the word robustness. We want to avoid disruption to our existing food system outcomes. We want to keep the food on the shelf in the shops. We want to keep our job. We want to keep our environment as good as possible. There's another view where we have a shock or a stress and our system, our outcomes go down. There's a crisis in the shop and there isn't any food on the shelf, but after a short while, it can come back to exactly the same. It bounces back. So we have the existing outcomes are either preserved and resisting disruption in robustness, or we're able to return to the hitherto existing outcomes after disruption because that's what we like. There is, however, a third sort of resilience, which we call reorientation, where we aim to accept alternative or different food system outcomes before or after disruption. For instance, we could change our diet to mean we're not putting such a stress on the system itself to deliver so much more calorie. Whichever of these three words one's aiming at, we need to think about reorganization, and that means changing the food system activities, changing the way we do things. And this is called adaptation. And either we change them directly, we just farm differently, or we shop differently, or we have the policy environment changes which induces and causes a change in the activities. So there is a policy opportunity, there is a practice opportunity, and in order to enhance resilience, we need to think, are we trying to enhance robustness or recovery or reorientation? And the chances are there's a little bit of each involved. So what to do? First of all, we could reorganize the food system activities, do the doing words differently, different form of producing food, different form of processing and packaging, different type of consumption pattern. We could reorganize the environments, the social, the policy, the market opportunities. We could organize different science and technology, as you know, for food processing, etc. So we can reorganize the environments, big policy agenda there. We could also reorganize our views on what we consider appropriate as outcomes. Big report a year or two ago came out with this statement: require a radical transformation of the system in order to provide a health and environmentally friendly diet. So perhaps better farming, consuming less meat, but I think fundamentally it's about valuing food which is nutritious rather than cheap. And this is a very difficult message, particularly for people who don't have very much money and for whom buying food is in itself a challenge. So there's a lot of things to think about here, but fundamentally, it does need a radical transformation of the system. So a final slide, another major report from the Lancet community, the Eat Lancet report, early last year, many of you may know of this, was making a call. It's saying we need healthy diets from sustainable food systems. And it's calling for a great food transformation, unprecedented range of actions taken by all food system sectors, but change the way the system works if we're going to achieve a healthy diet from a sustainable food system. That means the activities, the things we do, need to be environmentally sound, socially acceptable, and they've got to work from a business point of view. They've got to be economically viable from an enterprise for it to be sustainable. But then in terms of healthy diet, we've got these important components. It's got to have the correct nutrients, obviously. It's got to be safe. It's got to be affordable. But I've put in red at the bottom, it's got to be sufficient. And sufficient means the right amount for a purpose, not too much and not too little. So in order to enhance not only the sustainability, but also the resilience of our food system, we do need to think of how the food system operates. We need to understand it is a socio-ecological system. We need to understand it's what's called a complex adaptive system. The system responds to shocks and stresses. There are business opportunities, there are challenges, but fundamentally, the whole science, if you will, of food system thinking, food system dynamics, is to help policy, practice, and society at large move towards a more healthy and sustainable, healthy diet and a sustainable food system. So that's what I've prepared for this morning. And I'm very happy to take some questions now, if that's what we would like to do. So, Intani, how would you like to proceed now?
Okay, thank you, John, for a very interesting presentation. Now we will have a 5 minutes discussion. If anyone want to ask anything to John,
Please.
Please, you can write down or you can raise hand so that we can you can talk live through Zoom. Thank you. Okay. Okay. I have one question for you from via Vanessa. She would like to ask regarding about eating nutritious diets instead of cheap food, yeah, in developing countries, especially for poor people. What is your suggestion so they can consume nutritious food? Okay, because many of the poor
Sure,
people,
yeah. Well, first of all, I think knowledge about what is nutritious. There is a massive marketing campaign by food companies in many parts of the world to promote cheap food. Often it's got high sugar, high fat, high salt. It's got a very good profit margin. And so an awareness that what may be very appealing from an advert isn't necessarily the best for your physiology is perhaps the first thing. However, often fresh fruit and vegetables are more expensive than processed food.
Yeah.
So it is a serious challenge. I don't have the answer, but it's part of the transformation of the food system that will include the reduction in the availability of cheap and less healthy food and the increase in the availability of more nutritious food. That is a policy discussion.
Okay.
Excellent question.
Thank you, John. So, is there any more questions? Do you have any comments via Vanessa Dewi? Miss Via? While waiting, the questions, said that one of the strategy of for the resilience is reorganization. So how can we change our food system as a consumer?
Sure. Well, who is driving the food system? Us all as consumers?
Yeah.
Or is it the whole host of activities that we saw, from the farming through the processing through the retail? How do we change our consumption patterns is going to be a matter of societal debate. It's very easy for me to sit here and say we should have a different diet. We all know that, but it's very hard to sometimes do that. But I think the first thing is awareness and recognition that our current food system activities are bad for a number of reasons, but the food sector provides a livelihood for billions of people. And so we can't just stop the food system, because all those livelihoods would collapse, apart from the fact we wouldn't have bread in my kitchen. So big challenge. Yeah,
of course. Thank you, John. And the next question is from Muhammad Egi from IPB University. Okay. He would like to ask about how should we support farmers and farmers organization in the next month to protect them and prevent the health crisis becoming a food crisis. Thank you. Because of the COVID pandemic, I think.
Yeah. Well, each country, each nation, each district will have to have its own strategy. How to support farmers? We're having that very same debate here in England, particularly with the Brexit situation. So again, it's a combination of visionary policy needing to be designed, which understands the nature of the system. Problems with much policy is that it's directed at a single piece of the system, and it doesn't recognize all the other aspects of the system that will be affected by its intervention. And so my presentation was really making a case for the need for systems thinking. Think about how the system will respond to get any intervention. And if you're talking about how to support farmers, yes, maybe with subsidies, maybe with improving market access, maybe some new technology, all of those opportunities exist. It needs a very, very careful consideration. What will be the benefits of an intervention, as well as what will be the problems. Any intervention has winners and losers. And you need a systems perspective to be able to spot the losers, because so often we only think about the winners.
Okay, thank you, John. So here we have, questions from Dr. Priya Sembada. Before the pandemic COVID-19, some developing countries face very great challenges in providing food and nutrition security to all citizens. That might lead to children under age of 5 are stunned. What do you think about the food security in those countries during the post-pandemic?
Well, a huge question. These are all excellent questions. They're really hitting the button. The pandemic at the moment presents two challenges. There is a challenge of coping with the immediate situation. And then there is the challenge of how best to develop a recovery curve from the situation. And these are quite different. The immediate is often a response function, food aid, something like that. But that's a short-term solution. The real challenge is to think of a more resilient system, and the reorientation option, I think, is particularly important. really have a conversation at societal level. What do we really want going forward from the food system? And in terms of the small children, desperately important to ensure that their nutrition is maintained today, but it is part of a longer term strategy for the future.
Yeah, of course. So let's continue to our next questions, because there's some questions that I have to read. Yeah.
Excellent.
From Arya. He wants to know what kind of strategies must be carried out to improve food security, especially in the agricultural sector in the era of the COVID-19 pandemic. So what kind of strategy must be carried out to improve the food security, agricultural sector?
Well, there are a whole range of issues. I mean, obviously, over the last 50 years, the agriculture sector has had a huge amount of research, a lot of new technologies. If one's looking to increase food security for society, obviously agriculture is important, but really food security is about having access to food.
Yeah.
So your question is in two parts. What do we do about agriculture, and what do we do about food security? They are connected, but they are different.
Yeah.
Just assuming improving agricultural productivity will improve food security has proven to be false. We still have 1 billion people who are hungry. However, we have 6 billion people who are not hungry. So there has been a tremendous improvement. But I think it's important to differentiate the two parts of the question. They are coupled, but they are separate. Agriculture technologies, the research is continuing. IPB is preeminent in much of this work. Going to be future opportunities for agriculturalists. However, how do we handle societal food security is a separate issue, often to do with affordability.
Yeah. Okay. Going to the next questions from IPSAL alumni.
Excellent. Welcome.
So Ms. Ima wants to ask you, in your perspective, what is the good strategy to face this kind of problems, especially in Indonesia as developing countries, for expose the dangerous deficiencies in our food system and actively threatening the lives and livelihoods of people, particularly the most vulnerable and those in fragile contexts?
Well, as Irma will remember, I would say, first of all, think about a food system as a system. To map that system, think about who are the actors and the players in it. So then moving on to the policy, the national policy, Indonesia is in a good position because there is a ministry, Bappenas, which is Ministry of Planning. We do not have the equivalent in the UK. And the advantage of a ministry such as Bappenas is that it can look across the agendas of other ministries to some degree and see how best to join up different angles of policy formulation. And I think the balance across the policy structures in any country needs to be thought about. And if one's talking about food security, it's not just a matter of agriculture and environment and health or economics or trade or food standards agency. It's a combination of all of them.
Yeah.
How does one develop national level policy that will actually address food security for the nation while recognizing many nations are fundamentally agrarian? There's huge agricultural importance, but there are other things as well. And I've had the pleasure of living in Bogor for a number of months, and most people I'm seeing in the street are not farmers. They're working in service, they're working in business, they're working in the university.
Yes.
The population is not necessarily growing the food. Individuals, sectors of the population are growing the food.
Okay.
Irma, I'd say to Irma that that I put the question back to you and for you to consider how the work through the IFSTAL program and what we were working together through IFSTAL can begin to help bring together a strategy at the national level.
We hope so, Bu Ima.
Thank you very much, John, for your
Very nice
explanation.
to see you.
So we have someone who want to ask you live, Mr. Arman. Please, you can unmute your microphone first. Yeah, you can unmute the microphone first to be able to talk. Okay.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah, but your sound is not too too clear.
Not loud.
Okay. Hello. You can unmute your microphone, Mr. Arman.
Unmute.
Hello. Yes, you may ask the question. Hello. Where do you come from?
Hello.
Okay. Probably he has difficulties.
No, I can't hear, I'm sorry.
Probably you can write your question in the chat group because we cannot hear you. Your voice, your microphone is still muted.
Yes,
Okay.
now.
I can hear you.
Okay,
Please, what is the question and where do you come from?
Yes, my name is Arman. I'm from vocational school, Mataram University.
Okay.
That's long distance campus that located in Lima Regency, eastern part of West Nusa Tenggara province.
Okay,
So,
Mr. Arman from Mataram University.
From Mataram University, but
Yes.
from Lima campus, from the eastern part of West Nusa Tenggara province.
Yeah, what is your question, sir?
I would like to discuss because now we know that in a world of growing complexity and uncertainty, the security of food supplies is threatened by many factors. Professor Ingram has mentioned that this includes aging and also unexpected shocks like natural disasters, etc. So it is interesting when you talk about the resilience concepts. So my question is how you develop this conceptual framework for food resilience. I mean, how this could be implemented through stakeholder participants to ensure food security for everyone. So I think it is very important for me.
Yeah.
Did you get the question, John?
I think I've got it. Well, can we just stick with one question, please?
Okay.
We know that
Mr. Arman, please, for one question, because we cannot hear you clearly.
Okay.
Environmental and social-economic drivers is mildly to.
The first one is how to develop the food systems.
Well, that's right. How to enhance food system resilience. Well, a number of strategies. First of all, we've got to be clear about the answers to these 4 questions: of what, to what, for whom, and over what time period. Once we've got answers to that, which is called the boundary of the issue, we then think about, are we trying to improve the robustness of the system so that it resists disruption? Are we trying to improve the recovery options? And there are all manner of strategies for that, strategic grain reserves, for instance. Or are we trying to change the outcomes that we're happy with? An example would be to reduce the amount of red meat consumption, which is known to be, excessive red meat consumption is known to be bad for health. and has environmental consequences. So one can enhance the resilience of the food system by demanding less from it. And changing our dietary patterns is going to be one particular angle on that.
Okay. I think that's enough, Mr. Arman. I hope you can contact John for more if you want to discuss more, I think. Yeah, because the time, we only have like 15 minutes only for this section. Next, we will continue to our second speaker. So thank you, John, but stay there because we are going back to you at the end of the discussion.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you. So now.
Well, thank you very much for all your questions.
Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry for all the questions. I cannot read that all because we still have time at the end of the second speaker presentation. Okay, Professor Bill, are you ready to give us presentation?
Yes, I'm ready as I'll ever be.
Thank you. Please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. Well, thank you to the School of Vocational Studies and IPB for this opportunity. It's fantastic to be on an agenda following John, who has set the scene very well for me. And I also welcome the opportunity to reach out to such a large audience, nearly, nearly 500 people, which is amazing. So welcome to everyone. I'm going to be talking about the issue of childhood stunting, particularly in Eastern Indonesia, and how we might go about an integrated approach to that to transform the nutrition system in order to reduce stunting. And it builds very nicely on some of the concepts, the frameworks that John has introduced. So firstly, what do we mean by stunting? It's being low height for age. So on the left here, we see 4 figures: a normal child, a wasted child that has got low weight for height, a stunted child, which is low height for age, and an underweight child, which is low weight for age. And on the right, there's a photo of 2 children, a normal child and a stunted child, about the same age, but a big difference in height and weight. So it's being short or low height for age is part of the definition of stunting. It reflects chronic maternal and child undernutrition. So it's an issue of undernutrition of the mother and the baby. And it starts preconception. So before an adolescent girl becomes pregnant and is undernourished and anemic, and then it gets worse if the child's diet is also poor. And other factors too, in addition to nutrition, like water, clean water, and sanitation are also very important. And one of the tragedies of childhood stunting is that it's largely irreversible by the age of 2. And so that's a terrible thing to, a burden to put on a child and to put on a society, and to put on a nation. For the same reason, any investment that improves or reduces the prevalence of stunting has a huge benefit over the cost. So one of the best investments a government can make are investments to reduce stunting. So this figure here shows the percentage of the children under the age of 5 that are stunted in the countries sort of in our neighborhood. So Vanuatu, 28% of children under the age of 5 are stunted. Solomon Islands, 32%. Papua New Guinea, 50%. Timor-Leste, 50%. Indonesia as a whole, 36%, but in recent years, that's 5 years ago, in recent years, that figure's come down to 31%. So Indonesia's been making some good progress. But based on these figures, it's not unreasonable to say that there's an epidemic of chronic maternal and child undernutrition across these countries. And where I've been visiting the last few years in Sumba, the percentage is even higher. 61% of the children under the age of 5 are stunted. Now, one of the, excuse me, one of the reasons we're so interested in stunting is that it's a key indicator for monitoring progress on Sustainable Development Goal number 2. So ending hunger, achieving food security, improving nutrition, and promoting sustainable agriculture. We can't make progress on SDG 2 unless we make progress on reducing these figures on stunting. And we can't make progress on the whole SDG agenda unless we make progress on SDG 2. So it comes down that working on reducing the prevalence of stunting is critical to development as a whole. Here's a map of the prevalence of percentage of children that are stunted in Indonesia. And the darker the color on this map, the higher the percentage of children that are stunted. So the darker color is 55 up to 70% of children stunted. It's across Indonesia, but it tends to be worse in Eastern Indonesia, and that's because stunting is associated with other indicators like poverty and development infrastructure like sanitation and hygiene. Here are some figures from the National Indonesian Survey, Riskadas. The blue is 2013, the red dots are 2018, and this is the percentage of children that are stunted. So the good news is over those 5 years, the percentage has come down nearly everywhere. The national percentage here, 37 down to 31. And where I've been working in Sumba, NTT, it's come down from 52 to 43. So that's good news that there's progress, but these numbers are still unacceptably high. Now, the Indonesian government deserves credit and recognition for an excellent national strategy to reduce stunting in children in Indonesia. It's been coordinated by Bappenas, but involves something like 20 or more government agencies. It's an excellent, comprehensive national strategy that is taking into account all of the best thinking, the best science, from a health perspective, from an agriculture perspective, from a public health, from an infrastructure perspective. All of these things are considered and designed into this national program. However, such an aspirational, ambitious national program has many challenges when it comes to implementation. And across Indonesia, there are 34 provinces, 7,000 sub-districts, 82,000 villages, and all of these need to have the program implemented with resources, with human training, human capacity to implement such a complicated program. And a review by the World Bank a couple of years back concluded that with so many agencies responsible for this national strategy, there's a risk that some things are going to fall through the cracks. So implementation of this national strategy is difficult. The capacity to deliver it is highly variable across Indonesia. So some regencies, some districts are well equipped, others not so well. Coordination of many different government agencies is difficult. It's difficult in Australia, it's difficult in the UK, it's difficult in Indonesia. But it's what needs to happen from a food systems perspective. We also need strong involvement of the private sector, and we need ethical leadership, and we need healthy food products from the private sector. They're a big player in this and they need to be engaged. But the question remains, how do we implement this coordinated and integrated program at the local level with limited resources? And so that's been the focus of a proposal that I and colleagues have been developing over the last couple of years. Now, John's already highlighted that food security is complex. This slide here comes from a very recent FAO high-level panel of experts report on food security. This is the common definition of food security, the FAO definition of food security, when all people at all times have physical, social, economic access to sufficient, safe and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. And what they've done is mapped this definition against these 6 determinants or dimensions of food security. So we've got the common 3 that John showed earlier: utilization, availability, and access. And then we need some stability of these over the short and the long term. And then this report has added agency into that as one of the key dimensions of food security. And the inclusion of agency is very deliberate in that it's linking the right to food as a basic human right. And it was mentioned by the rector in his introductory talk. So agency is key to the right to food, and it's now being promoted as a component of food security. Now, here's a terrible diagram that if my students put this up, I would mark them down for having too many words on one slide. It comes from a paper, a 2018 paper in the Journal of Maternal and Child Nutrition, and it's a review of the determinants of stunting in Indonesia. And what we've got at the top is stunted growth and development. And then what we've got here are the causes, which include maternal factors, home environment, poor quality food, food and water safety, clinical, subclinical infections. And then down below, we have the underpinning factors. So this includes the political economy, health and healthcare, education, society, culture, agriculture and food systems, and water, sanitation and environment. And you can see that even if we do an excellent job in improving agriculture and improving food systems, that in itself will not be enough to reduce stunting. So we need some way to integrate our agriculture and food system interventions with some of these other factors. And now we're beginning to get very complicated. In a single project, we can't do everything. So we have to be a bit selective about what we do. So in that same paper by Beale, he identified what he calls points of leverage. These are based on the literature, what we already know from experts and from experience. These are the things that are related to stunting. So one of them is non-exclusive breastfeeding in the first 6 months. That needs to be addressed. Low household socioeconomic status, premature birth, short birth length, low maternal height, low education, unimproved latrines and untreated drinking water, poor access to healthcare, and living in rural areas. These are all associated with stunting. And there are also gaps in knowledge, education about nutrition, society and culture. So in here we have gender equality and things like religious beliefs, and agriculture and food systems. How do we integrate agriculture and food systems within these other factors? And again, water, sanitation, health. So we're beginning to narrow down from a range of factors to a few key factors. And so this has led us to design this proposal where our central goal is to transform the nutrition system to reduce childhood stunting. And one of our innovations is to adapt the food system framework that John's been talking about to include nutrition, and to use that framework to map the existing food systems and establish baselines. And then we would design a series of interventions in each of the activities. So producing food, for example, we would focus on high nutrient dense food like fruits, vegetables, fish, eggs, this sort of thing. Moving away from staple crops like rice. which are calories but not so much nutrients. We'd also look at food processing. How do we enhance the nutrient content of food? How do we maintain nutrition value? How do we maintain food safety? We'd look at this important sector here of exchanging food, which includes the wholesale, the retail, but also trade and barter. And this includes the unhealthy food that John mentioned, the ultra-processed food high in sugar, fat, and salt. How do we talk about that and reduce that in the marketplace? And how do we increase healthy food options? And consuming food, education around diet and cooking, but also this idea of agency comes in here, gender equality, empowering people to take charge of their food and their diet and their nutrition. So if you remember, these are the 4 activities from John's food systems framework. But even that's not enough. We need to focus on water and sanitation because people need to have healthy guts, clean water, reduced parasites. And we also need to focus on maternal and child health and reducing intestinal health problems. So here we see a number of sectoral interventions that normally would be done separately, and now we're proposing to do them in a more integrated way. The second innovative systems that sort of innovation that we're talking about is to evaluate whatever we do through a series of lenses. So one of them would be a culture lens. So is what we're doing appropriate to the local culture? Another one is a gender lens. So for example, we don't want to increase the labor and the hard work of women in growing food if it takes away from their time to prepare food and to provide care for children. So there needs to be a strong focus on gender. There needs to be environmental lens, so whatever we do is sustainable. And there needs to be a governance and policy lens that seeks to get coherence between the government policies and the private sector policies. And then around all of this, we have monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning. So there's a big focus on learning here for all stakeholders. And around all of that, a program management activity, because getting all of these people with different agendas, different disciplinary backgrounds, different worldviews to agree on a project or program vision will be very important. So that's the thing we're proposing in a nutshell. It has innovations in a systemic sense, so the systems framework, the lenses, but there's also a lot of specific interventions. For example, around producing food, we'd focus on nutrition sensitive agriculture, around processing, enhancing nutrient content and food safety, around distributing food through enabling local food economy with smartphones and blockchain and so on, and around empowering people, improving agency in the consuming sector. And I've highlighted agency and empowerment here because agency is now one of those dimensions of food security, and empowerment is important for the universality aspect of the Sustainable Development Goals, where universality refers to leave no one behind. So we really have to target the more vulnerable people in the community. Our project partners initially have been my university, LIPI, and the local government, Sumber Barat Daya. But if this proposal develops, we will welcome more involvement from regional universities, particularly in Eastern Indonesia, national and local planning authorities, local NGOs, business, both large and small, and the University of Oxford. Now, I want to just leave that and touch upon COVID-19 because we're living through COVID-19 right now. So all across the world, the pandemic is exposing vulnerabilities in our food system. So we're seeing global food supply chains disrupted. We're seeing the concentrated market power exposed. We're seeing how our food sector labor force has been casualized in many countries. And we're seeing examples of panic buying. So I want to go back to this, this is raising the question that John introduced: how resilient is our food system when confronted by this pandemic? And John mentioned this as well. When we talk about resilience, we need to think of resilience of what, to what, for whom, and over what time frame. And so the of what, using the framework that John introduced, are these outcomes here. So resilience of food security, resilience of employment, resilience of the environment, to these drivers, for various actors over whatever time frame we'd like to consider. So let's look at COVID-19 in the food systems framework. So the coronavirus itself is a biological driver. The government policies and programs that are responding to the coronavirus, the public health problem of the coronavirus, are examples of socio-economic drivers. And the two represent a classic interaction. So people around the world, governments around the world, are trying to balance the public health costs, deaths due to the coronavirus, with the costs to people's livelihoods and businesses of shutting down economies and societies. So this driver interaction is being played out in every country, in every country of the world where the pandemic is. So those driver interactions impact on our food system, the activities and the outcomes. So here is food security and nutrition with the 6 dimensions of food security from the recent FAO report. And you can see that the driver interactions are affecting our capacity for producing food. They're affecting distribution, processing, and consuming. So in Australia, we've seen panic buying by consumers that have contributed to shortages. We've seen meatworks as a hotspot of coronavirus spreading. We've seen food producing being affected by restrictions on labour mobility. We've seen an increase in environmental pollution from plastics associated from takeaway food that's increased under the pandemic. These impacts by the coronavirus then have a feedback into the virus. So we have either an increase or a decrease in numbers of infections, in numbers of deaths. And we have socioeconomic feedback. So governments respond by restricting mobility of casual labour, then easing restrictions, which then may spread viruses. So we're seeing the COVID-19 pandemic play out through the food system. And I invite all of you to think about your own local situation and your own role in this food system, and reflect on what the pandemic is doing to food systems in your region, because it's providing an excellent case study in a shock to the system. And I think the food system framework is essential for us to work through that and think about it in a clear way. So in Australia, these are some of the emerging issues that are being revealed by the COVID pandemic. The government restricted movements, both internationally and locally between states, and that's really restricting the movement of casual labour, and that's having a big impact on food production. So many growers are worried they can't get labour to harvest produce or to plant new crops. We're seeing that global food supply chains, both export and import, are quite vulnerable to very abrupt political actions like closing borders, imposing tariffs. We're seeing examples of concentrated food processing activities like meatworks, resulting in the spread of coronavirus and resulting in those businesses being shut down. And we've seen examples of panic buying, which have exacerbated food shortages. So all of these things are different activities and having an impact on food system outcomes. That's where I'd like to leave it. Very happy to try to address a few of the questions, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Okay, thank you, Professor Bill, for the insight presentation. So now we have 15 minutes discussion with Professor Bill. If anyone want to ask him, you can write down the questions or you can raise hand and then you can ask him live through Zoom, please. Okay, we have one question from Hardin. He asked how to prevent stunting in rural areas, even though we know that rural areas are a source of food for humans. Stunting should not occur, yeah? What is the right system approach developed so that every child can grow up with adequate nutrition and free from stunting? And how to handle stunting during this COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, I think the first thing is that stunting is the result of a poor environment for the child's health. And a big part of that poor environment is undernutrition, both of the mother, even preconception, and for the infant. So nutrition is very important, but it's not just nutrition. There are other factors as well. So in rural areas, there may be local food production, but people may not be able to afford to buy it. So there's issues around affordability, issues around accessibility, issues around adequate health, primary health care, issues around water and sanitation. So all of these issues are fairly well known. The Indonesian government has developed a very nice national strategy that takes account of all those factors. But still the challenge is how to implement that national policy at the local level, where often infrastructure like health infrastructure, water and sanitation infrastructure is poor, and the human capacity of government to deliver is also underdeveloped. So what we're promoting, and also what the Indonesian government is promoting, is a more integrated approach that looks at agriculture and nutrition and health in a coordinated way and tries to design coordinated and integrated interventions with the hope that doing it this way will have a greater impact than what we've done in the past, which has been more or less disconnected single point interventions.
Okay, yeah, everything was like connected. Yep. Yeah.
Everything is interconnected, but we're used to doing things within our silos. So I come from agriculture. I think producing more food will be the cure for undernutrition. But we know it's not so simple. You know, the public health people see it differently. They say we have to improve nutrition, but they don't look at agriculture. So what the food systems approach is promoting is awareness of your own disciplinary expertise, its role and its importance, but also awareness that there are other important sectors that you need to interact with and coordinate with. So food systems is about increasing our awareness of where our expertise fits within a broader system.
Okay. So the next question, I think it's similar with the first one. So this is a question from Dinda. I would like to ask you, I have heard that there is a vision called Zero Hunger in 2030. My question is, what is the mission of steps to actualize it? He said.
Well, yes, so SDG 2, the Sustainable Development Goal number 2, includes zero hunger. So the world, every government in the world has signed up to the SDG agenda, which means every government has signed up to eliminating hunger by the year 2030. So it's an aspirational objective. You know, we would all like to do that. Will we do that? I think no, we won't achieve that by 2030, but there's a huge amount of effort by governments and private sector and individuals around the world to improve the situation. So there are a number of indicators associated with SDG 2, sustainable agriculture, adequate intake of calories, adequate intake of nutrients, diverse diets, as well as the indicators like stunting and obesity and overweight, wasting, etc. So a huge effort around the world to monitor our situation and to work towards that zero hunger by 2030. The bad news is that we're actually not making very good progress at the moment.
Okay.
So we're sort of slipping behind on many of the indicators. And what that means is that we have to renew our efforts. We have to increase, governments and private sector have to increase their investment in efforts to improve nutrition and end hunger and develop sustainable agriculture. And part of this increased investment, as well as investing in the disciplinary areas of public health and agriculture and environment and business, part of the investment needs to go towards what we're talking about here around food systems, because an effective food systems approach will enhance all of the disciplinary and sectoral interventions. So it's not, we're not saying do food systems and ignore the other disciplinary approaches. They need to happen together and be coordinated.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. For the next questions, from Sheila Hanindra, she would like to ask whether there should be adjusted approach for stunting issues that happens in different regions. If there should be, how to determine the right approach for specific area?
Yeah, these are all excellent questions, and you know, I don't have definitive answers for any of them. This question, I think, is a very good point, and that is, although we have a national strategy in Indonesia, which is very good, its implementation has to be at a local level, and the local implementation must reflect the local needs, the local diversity, and so on. So a national strategy needs to have flexibility in how it's delivered locally. So I think the point of your question is a very good one. I fully agree that you know, you need a different approach on a small island with a heavy reliance on coastal fisheries to a community that is inland and relying on heavily on rice production and so on. An urban community is very different to a rural community. The level of public health infrastructure needs to be taken into account. So one of the first things I think is a bit of going into a new district is a stock take of the situation, including very deep engagement with the local community to get feedback on what the local community see the needs and you know what their vision is for what should happen.
Okay. So going back to the next question is from Arya. He has a question, is one of the prevention of stunting in infant is breastfeeding, but what if the mother of the baby dies during childbirth? Are there alternatives to breast milk substitutes for the baby?
Yes, so non-exclusive breastfeeding is by far the recommended approach. You know, all the public health and nutrition expertise points to that. But there are circumstances where that's not possible, and the extreme cases where the mother dies. But there are also cases where the mother is very malnourished and may be deficient in certain nutrients as well. So in these cases, there needs to be some supplementation. And then the issue is on the quality of the infant formula. And there are poor quality infant formulas and there are very good quality infant formulas. So again, a very good question. I think it needs to be looked at in context where the preferred strategy of breastfeeding is not available. There needs to be supporting formula options available. Yep.
Yes, of course. Okay, next question is from Dr. Silvana from Melbourne Polytechnic. So sadly, the enormous amount of food waste in Australia continues. Are there any developments on this front to enable further support to other nations?
Yeah, it's very true. There is a huge amount of waste in the Australian food system. You know, the general figure that gets sort of bandied about is 30% of the food that produced is wasted, but that obviously is highly variable. Perishable foods like fresh fruit, like mangoes, I've seen figures maybe 70% of mangoes produced are not consumed, end up wasted. So there is a big public education and public awareness program in Australia to reduce food waste. So that's basically aiming at educating individuals and changing behavior of individuals. There's also programs to target retailers and packaging to reduce serving sizes and to reduce what's called predatory marketing, where people marketing sell very large serves or large proportions or 2 for 1, which leads to waste. Yeah. So there are a number of things that are being done around the world on reducing food waste. It's not an easy thing to reduce because we're dealing with individual behavior, but I think there is potential for individuals to change their behavior and reduce waste quite dramatically. The other strategy is then to use food waste, because there will always be inevitable food waste, but to use that in, say, composting to create a valuable resource that can be used in fertilizer to produce food.
Okay, thank you. So next we have question from Bayu from Kendari, Southeast Sulawesi, Indonesia. He asked about the online transportation was gotten to serve food easily. It's like GrabFood or Gojek here, yeah, GoFood, for the people in sub-district together with commercial market built in the mid of central. But half of villagers does not access the food by this digital because the time and distance that did not possible. So how this digital extend to them in order that enough the healthy better?
Yeah, very interesting question. Here in Australia, also a big increase in the use of home delivery.
Yeah, because of the pandemic, yeah.
Yes, being encouraged by the pandemic. So we're seeing a big increase in things like Uber Eats.
Yeah.
We don't have Gojek.
Oh, yeah.
Same sort of idea. And although it's come in as a temporary response to the pandemic, I think it will become more or less a permanent change as people get used to it. But the question, I think, the heart of the question is, how do you get that sort of service into poorer areas that have less purchasing power, but also less IT, information technology infrastructure. And I think it's a really good point, but I do think that the technology is rapidly developing, and I think the uptake of technology will become broader, greater, almost universal coverage, even in very poor areas. There's technology around local area networks that will allow communication between smartphones, even if the internet is poor. There's developments around cheap smartphones, made in China for $100 maybe or less. So I think the technology will rapidly develop, and I think business models will also develop. And the challenge for us is the opportunity to use that technology to get better nutrition outcomes. The technology itself is not good or bad. It's how we use it that determines whether it's good or bad. So I think there's an opportunity for people in public health, in nutrition, in agriculture, to drive this innovation, you know, to make sure that the right people are getting benefits and the benefits are shared across the food system and not concentrated with just a few.
Yes, okay. Yeah, because you know, the infrastructure in Indonesia, like probably in Sulawesi, it's very far. That's why probably that's one of the reasons he asked.
Yep. Yeah, but I think that could change rapidly. You know, we've got entrepreneurs like Elon Musk sending little satellites up in the air. You've got other people with local networks, and I don't understand the technology, but they claim they can create the equivalent of a local internet with where the internet currently is not.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the question from Jude and Muhammad Arsi. I think it's like connected. Like he asked that how can we prevent stunting in urban area, especially in populated area of the city? Because here in, you know, many pregnant women in this situation giving birth for the next several years, but they have economics problem, especially in this pandemic era. Probably their husbands like laid off from the work, something like that. So maybe the baby gets stunting and undernutrition. Yeah. So what do you think about it?
I think that observation is correct. What I've been reading is that the pandemic is likely to push back progress on a lot of the metrics for SDG 2, including, you know, stunting and wasting and so on. So more people losing their livelihoods, a reduction in income, you know, less purchasing power, likely to result in poorer diets and poorer nutrition and poorer outcomes of the key indicators. So we are facing a very dire situation, but what the pandemic does is focus attention on this, and it creates an opportunity where more radical sort of transformation becomes possible. So before the pandemic, people are less likely to think we need a radical change, you know, just we'll change a little bit here, a little bit there. I think post-pandemic, people are realizing that we might need transformational change, more radical change to the system, and that potentially can have far-reaching benefits. So yes, the situation is quite bad and the pandemic's made things worse, but optimistically, there may be opportunity to make bigger change and bigger improvement down the track.
Yes, we hope so.
I wonder if we should bring John into the argument.
Yeah, I think your time is already up, yeah, for the 15 minutes. So it is the last discussion. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those fantastic questions.
Okay, so this is the last discussion with both speakers, Mr. John and Mr. Bill. So anyone who wants to ask, wow, we have so many questions here. Okay, so from Reza, what is your opinion to solve stunting, especially in Indonesia?
Bill.
I think we've covered this question pretty well already. You know, if the person asking the question is really interested, I think have a look at the Indonesian national strategy to reduce stunting. The Bappenas strategy that lays out the formal government strategy, and it's an excellent strategy. And then I think have a look at a couple of the references in my talk there, the one by Beale particularly. And if you still have questions, then we could discuss it further. But I think I'd be repeating myself if I just said more now.
Okay. You want to say something, John?
Well, no, I agree with Bill. I think you covered the situation very well. It might be worth observing that I've read through the questions in the chat, Really excellent, really sensible questions. Many of them, if not all of them, can best be addressed from a systems perspective.
Yeah.
Some of them are drilling into health and nutrition, some of them are drilling into agriculture. But one of the points that we've both made is the importance of seeing how the system works and recognizing that one individual discipline or entry point is insufficient. Obviously, we can't do everything all the time at once. We have to choose what actions we wish to take and which policies need to be developed, but they must be developed recognizing the system dynamic. I think that's the message that we're both trying to convey. And all disciplines, all of you on the seminar, you've all got your individual skills and knowledge bases. It's all relevant. However, it's so much more effective if we all apply our particular disciplines through a systems lens. What we've been trying to do with the IF-Style program is help people appreciate the dynamic of the system, to see where all our individual contributions can best be made, whether it's, as Bill's talk, it's in any of the food system activities, or is it in WASH, or is it in maternal care? It's all of it. It's all, and in order to address the stunting issue, one needs to bring all of these things together. But it needs a framework. And the framework Bill put up, I thought was really neat. Particularly, I like the diagram that you used showing how the response to COVID in a food systems framework. That was really neat, I thought. And that it's the feedbacks in the system that catch us out. Because often when we're designing in agriculture or health or marketing and food processing, we only think about the intervention and its target because that's what it's about. And we tend to forget all the other consequences of that intervention. And the diagram Bill used with the COVID in the food systems framework, I thought was really excellent. To show biological feedback. But there's also a policy and societal feedback. And they're different, but they both happen. So, you know, systems thinking is a way forward.
And John, one of the really useful things of that your framework to me is that a key outcome of food systems is food security. Yes, that's important. But what COVID-19 is showing is that its impact on employment and livelihoods has been really important in a country like Australia, and I suspect so in Indonesia. The people that have lost livelihoods and the businesses that have been shut down,
yes,
had a huge, you know, that's a huge impact in the system, and it's having feedbacks to producing food or retailing food.
Yes.
And it's highlighted that in Australia, at least, that a lot of the employment, both at the producing end and at the consuming end, is dominated by casual employment. Yes. And when people are late in Australia, the government had a policy to support workers, but not casual workers. And so the casual workers in horticulture and in restaurants and cafes, they lost their job, but they also didn't get government welfare. And so they were in a desperate situation because they had no money to buy food.
Yeah.
Okay. So the food systems framework reminds us that we get several outcomes from our food activities, not just food security, but a really important one is livelihoods.
Okay, I would like to welcome our Dean, Mr. Arif. Would you like have any comments?
No. I think the discussion is excellent. So, Prof. Bill dan Prof. John.
Halo, Pak Arif.
Nggak usah.
Oke. Oke, Pak. Okay, then we may continue.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have questions. What is your opinion about food waste and how can we solve it?
Well, there are a number of opinions. Some people say, make food more expensive.
Okay.
That is going to be hugely difficult for the people who are already challenged in affording food as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Other people say, have an education campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Other people say, it's very difficult to get people to change behavior by saying, don't do something.
Mm-hmm.
Easier to get people to change behavior by showing the benefit of doing something. So a positive message.
Mm-hmm.
So the message, don't waste food, just
Yeah.
falls on deaf ears. But the message, think of all the fantastic meals you can make with the stuff left over from yesterday, and here now is a much more positive way of doing it.
Yeah.
But it's the behavioral economics which is the key issue.
Yeah.
The psychology, the cultural norms, all of that stuff. And it's very much what we call the soft thinking, rather than the you must not waste your food. That doesn't work.
Yeah, we have to like increase our awareness of changing our behavioral food system, especially in household. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, in England where I live, the average household throws away in US dollars about $900 worth of food every year.
Oh.
Which is just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely crazy. So if you say, think what you could do if I gave you $900, you could have a holiday, you could buy a new TV, you could buy whatever it is.
Yeah.
Oh, how am I going to get my $900? Well, stop throwing away, food which you could eat. I buy less, therefore you're not spending so much in the shop.
Mm-hmm.
And the word sufficient. Do you remember my very last slide? My very last word on the very last slide was sufficient.
Yeah.
It is really a valuable word because it means the right amount for a given purpose.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So next questions. What would happen in the next years ahead to the food system? How to overcome the food system disturbance?
Well, I think if we're talking just the next year ahead, the big factor will be how we respond in the short term to the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So getting a handle on who is now more vulnerable, that is food insecure. What effect is it having? Who are the vulnerable populations, and what sort of targeted interventions are needed in the short term to address that. So there's a short-term response there, almost an emergency response. And then longer term, I think we have this opportunity to use the pandemic as a way to say, okay, this pandemic has exposed a lot of things that are not so resilient about our food system. Where can we intervene and design a food system that is going to be more resilient when the next shock comes along? So there's a short-term response, a long-term response. It's hard to give you specific examples because it will all be very local and context specific.
Absolutely. But it's an opportunity, as Bill is saying, to stop and think. Every disaster is an opportunity. If you remember in my talk, I was saying, in order to enhance resilience, we can enhance the robustness of the system so it doesn't get affected by a stress or a shock. We can enhance the recovery options so we get back to where it was, or we can think of a different future. And it's that reorientation, the changing our attitudes and our values of what actually is necessary for our food system. That is the opportunity, both to enhance the resilience, but also to enhance the sustainability. Because if, for instance, we are not demanding so much animal product, saying everybody has to be vegetarian. I'm just saying reduce a bit the amount of animal product.
Yeah.
Then that is a transformation. But it also helps the sustainability, because as you know, the red meat sector has a very large environmental footprint.
Yeah.
But just to be clear, I'm not advocating any particular type of diet other than the sufficient diet.
Yeah.
It's the only word I would use.
Yeah. Okay. So Putri want to ask to Professor Bill, is there any specific portion or amount of each nutrient within the food to fulfill the needs of childhood stunting?
Yes, thank you, Putri. I'm not a human nutrition expert, so I'm not going to say you need so much iron and so much zinc and so on. What I will say though is that there has been a move away from a focus on specific nutrients towards looking more at diets, so what people are actually eating. So promoting diverse diets rather than a focus on specific nutrients is sort of what I'm reading in public health and nutrition literature. So you can find, breakdowns of individual foods in terms of their nutrient constituents, but I think in practical terms, it's better to focus on what we know is a healthy and diverse diet. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, somebody want to ask from UNRAM, Mr. Arman again. But sir, can you please unmute first your video?
Can I just say,
yes,
in response to that previous question, but also there's a second question from I think Rianti.
Rianti, yes.
Sorry, and she's asking about, are there any programs focusing on
pregnant women, infant and toddler
children? Yes, there are some very excellent programs. You can have a look at the program called the First 1,000 Days. So 1,000 days is the number of days from conception to second birthday.
Oh, okay.
So there's a lot of information on the website about the first 1,000 days. And the second one is called the SUN program, S-U-N, which is Scaling Up Nutrition. And again, there's a lot of information on the website. So I think you'll get a lot of good information about specific programs targeting pregnancy and infant feeding there.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. So please, Mr. Arman, you may ask the question.
Thank you very much. Everybody can hear my voice?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Great to hear that. Also, the title or the topic of the web seminar talking about the agriculture in broad term. It is, in my opinion, that it can also be interpreted in the narrow sense, like a livestock. Because to me, livestock is powerful engine for the development of the agriculture and food sector, and a driver for major economic, social, and environmental changes in the food worldwide. This is also uniquely powerful and for understanding the issues around the sustainable agriculture. So I didn't hear the two speakers, the two professors talking about the livestock, the human interaction, but talking about the beast. And also Professor Bill Bellotti on talking horticulture and fisheries when he mentioned about this, explain about the slide. I didn't know, I didn't understand why. And then go back to the breastfeeding. I rather disagree if one of the approach to solve the stunting problems only after the children birth. It must be considered as well from the woman who bearing the kids since in the uterus. So if the mother of the baby didn't give enough consume of the protein. That's the most important. So it can be carried over after the childbirth. So
Okay.
I don't know why this cannot be used as approach, giving the mother a lot of drinking like milk, something like meat, egg. It's related to the livestock.
Okay.
So
Okay.
livestock production to me is central of food system development. Talk about the system development of food system development. It is particularly dynamic and complex agriculture sector. I didn't know why I didn't mention about the livestock.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Arman. We do understand the questions.
For market concentration, I'm sorry.
Yeah, he asked about why you don't mention about the livestock
Like
in the food system, because it's he thinks that it is the powerful engine in the food sector and driver for in the food sector also. And for Professor Bill, why do you say stunting after the child? It should be like the mother who is like, we have to give the mother nutrition food from livestock such as milk and egg, so that we can decrease the stunting, okay, of the child.
Yeah, so the second point first, absolutely, it's about maternal and child nutrition. So definitely the focus has to be on the mother, but also particularly with young preconception women, girls, has to be a focus on them. So yeah, agree with the question. The second one about animal products, yes, I did mention eggs and fisheries as two examples, but basically I don't care where the protein comes from, but we need higher protein in many Indonesian diets. So if that comes from milk, very good. If it comes from chickens, also very good. So I'm not, if I've missed out on livestock, it wasn't intentional, but I think it has a very important role to play. What I did mention is that in the proposal we're putting forward, that we would not have a focus on rice, because I'm assuming will be a continuing focus on rice by the Indonesian government, by the Indonesian research community, and there'll be already a lot of rice in people's diets, regardless of what we do. But my focus is how do we diversify the diet, including animal products. So you're right to highlight that. And particularly, increase protein in mothers and children, yes. So thank you for the good points.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I'm not a nutrition expert either, but what I am aware of is what's often called the importance of the first 1,000 days of a child's life. From conception for 1,000 days takes them to the age of about 2.5. I think the point that's coming out now is the importance of the 500 days before conception for the mother. And so you talk about the first 1,000 days for the child, but let's not forget the importance of the preceding 500 days for the mother.
Yes.
So thinking about building the nutritional status of the mother has got to start way before conception.
Yes. Okay. I think that's cover your questions, Mr. Arman. Yeah, and we have the last question. This is from Andre. What is your opinion on the prospect of utilizing food waste as feed for maybe insect to be used as nutrition source for the less fortunate? Is it viable if it is operated by the government?
Well, yeah, it's a great question. There's a lot of interest now in the research community with what's called insect-based proteins. We have a cultural challenge in my country, in England. People would not be very happy eating insect protein. We know we are not very happy eating insect protein, particularly if you see the animal whether it's the larval stage or the adult stage. However, we're very, very keen on eating fish from fish farms. And so if you can use a fish to process the insect into fish, rather than feeding the fish with soy or feeding the fish with other fish, there is an advantage. But in other societies, in Southern Africa, where I spent a lot of time, people eat a lot of insects, larval stage and adult stage, and not a problem. And in my country, we think prawn and lobster is very acceptable food. Taxonomically, it's an arthropod, just like a cockroach is an arthropod. So there's a perception issue. It's called the yuck factor. But the prospect for utilizing food waste as a feed for insects is good, but it's better not to have the food waste. Good question.
So in Australia, John, there are new businesses starting up producing protein bars, a snack, which you know, health conscious people eat these protein bars to get a bit more protein in their diet, and the protein is coming from insects, and you don't know you're eating insects.
No.
There's no yuck factor, but there's a new pathway of using insects into the protein. So, and I think people are quite accepting of it. Yeah, and I know personally that eating crickets with beer goes down very nicely.
Here in Indonesia, we have crispy crickets.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, have you tried?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's all of the questions all the speakers have covered. So this is the end for our session. So due to our limited time, I'm so sorry because not all of the questions can be read today. But I think all the questions have been covered by the speakers, and I would like to say thank you for our two marvelous speakers, John and Bill, and to all active participants who are eager to learn about food system and food security resilience. Now we are at the end of the session, but before we close it, I would like to conclude what the speakers has presented. The food system activities lead to food system outcomes that leads to food security. And one of the food insecurities is malnutrition. The case example is stunting children in Indonesia. But one of the ways to decrease malnutrition is how to maintain food safety by transforming the nutritional diet through the mother and also to the born child. And we also need of system thinking and also promoting awareness always out of our expertise. And last but not least, is sufficient diet is very important to us, especially in handling food waste. So thank you to all speakers, audience, and organizing committee. So can you please give a big applause by clicking the clap hand icon? Thank you, stay safe, and have a nice day. Back to our Master of Ceremony, Miss Sylvia.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Intani, for guiding the discussion. And thank you, Mr. John and Mr. Bill. It was precise and relevant presentation. I'm sure that all of us is relate to the every word that you mentioned. Thank you for your sharing. But ladies and gentlemen, before we closing the webinar, we would like to take a picture. So please open the camera. There are 90 slides, I think. Okay. Is it ready? Slide 1, we start with the slide 1. And then next. Is it done? Is it done? Maybe Mrs. Tonya?
Yes, Miss Sylvia. Nice.
Okay, thank you, Miss Yvonne. Okay, thank you. I hope you found this webinar informative and useful. Thank you for spending time with us today, and thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, John. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih, Pak John. Terima kasih, Pak Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Bill and Mr. John. Thank you, Pak Arif.
Sama.
Terima kasih semuanya.
Good.
Also, nice shirt, John.
Oh,
yeah, John and Bill. Nice to see you again.
Okay, friends. Have a wonderful evening. And congratulations for organizing this. I think it's been a fantastic organizational feat to get. Bill said,
thank you.
Yeah, Bill said, you know, speaking with 500 people at once is quite something, and well done.
The organization committee actually is all yours. Yeah, Sylvie, Ima, they were the first participant for the food security and security system at that time that you run the workshop
Good.
for us.
Oh,
Last
excellent.
year.
Excellent.
So
yes.
they are all now to organize event.
So Arif, we will claim this webinar as an outcome of the IFSTOL training.
That's right. That's good. Yeah. I mean, this is one of the
Absolutely. Sure.
Yeah.
We'll write a short piece on the IFSTOL.
the multiplier of IFSTOL, courses last year.
Excellent.
Well, that's excellent news, and you know, again, congratulations to everybody who organised it, and thank you to all the participants in time with us today.
Yeah.
And good luck with the rest of the event tomorrow as it goes forward, and all the rest of it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Others. So I'll say goodbye.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, John.
Nice to see you all again. And
bye.
Sylvia, you make an excellent chairperson.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you to Intani as well, the moderator.
Okay. Bye.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.